trades from all over the world. And because of that, the ideas of place and societal roles and bigotries really didn't apply. Ultimately, if you got yourself here up until about 1860, good for you. We're on equal ground. And that was kind of the West Coast way. And we see that in the writings, and we see that in the maps, we see that in a lot of ways. I find it an interesting aspect. It was tough getting here, and if you made it, that was your vetting for the most part. And I think that's one of the reasons that San Franciscans have always had this certain at ease with newcomers. We are the most transient city. I've been every place. I used to go different city every day, 30 countries a month, you know, but no place that's so transient as us. Less than 7% of the people live here now than when any of us moved here, right? I'm here 35 years, you're 40 years, you're 40 years, right? It's amazing. So, and many other cities are that way, but not, San Francisco has always been that way. We have always had that transition from day one, from the 1840s, and then when gold came, the 1840s are very different from the 1850s, and when silver came, that changed. 1860s are very different from the 1850s, and we see this. We have these major events that affect our economy and affect our perspective. But San Francisco is really fun that way.
Bruce, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious, Tom mentioned the map of the 7 rabbits.
Oh yeah. So
It's right here.
there it is. It's La Perouse. And in short, I had what used to be called a learning disability. And what that grew into was realizing a certain savant that I have. And basically, I can load aircraft to my head, right? So what that means is that my spatial memory is a little weird and I remember a lot. But what I couldn't see was negative and positive space. So something like Escher was absolutely confounding to me. My brother loved Escher. He was an illustrator. I'm like, what is that? What's the other direction? I don't see it. I don't see it. Living in Holland as a kid, this is horrible. But what I could see was the shapes. So there's one rabbit, and there's another rabbit, Thumper. He's got a big foot. There's a big lion who's going to eat the rabbits. And there are others in there. So the conceptualism of maps was often how I would identify and name them. And because they were difficult to understand, they really provoked my curiosity. But they also were cryptic. So that also provokes your curiosity, but you also I'm coming at it a little backwards, right? I don't know where it comes from, I don't know where it's of, I don't know what it is, I'm not sure which is land, I'm not sure which is water. I know it's got a bunch of rabbits in it. But for me, and the way this map does work, which is really fun, is that we're oriented with east at the top of the map. And we're coming in as you would sail into San Francisco Bay. And once you get that perspective, then this is Drake's Bay and Point Reyes. And we come in and this is the Golden Gate, which we see as a really narrow passageway. So something this big, you're sailing out here. We don't see it on the map, but right here are the Farallon Islands on this map. So that's where you sail. You say 20 miles offshore. Our shoreline is coastal cliffs. And you get up on it, you got waves, really fraught with disasters. So the Farallons are a resupply point. Any island is a resupply point, but the Farallons are particularly good. They have bird eggs, they have sea lions, they have mammals, they have fish. They have a lot of sharks too. So they're the Farallons. So you come in and you sail in, and here's Angel Island, here's Alcatraz. This is Blossom Rock. Blossom Rock was blown up in about 1875 because it was right in the way. It's right in the shipping channel. So it's now about 500 feet underwater or something. All the riparian information. This is the Laguna de los Dolores. This is the lake that is the Mission District, and this is the mission itself. This, in context with the 1857 map over there, shows us a couple of things, just in general. This little point right here is Rincon Point, and the Bay Bridge will go from here to this island to Oakland. This island really should probably be over here. But what's interesting to me is right next to this Rincon Point are 2 islands. Well, those 2 islands are actually 2 hills that on the 1857 map are documented as 2 hills. And at the bottom of those hills, there's no water. Right? So it's important to understand that when they came here, 1788, bay levels were at least a foot higher and possibly 18 inches higher. Right? So this is the change in bay levels as a result of water runoff, snow melt, tidal influences, moon. And these are all factors that are part of the chaos theory. And it surprises people because this hill right here, anybody been to the restaurant Farallon? Nice restaurant, Second and Townsend or so right there. It's right at the base of that hill. That hill would be 100 feet above it, and it's 100 feet underground technically. So that's a spot that was once a hill with water around it. Well, it makes sense though. With this lake, it's pretty big, but what's really this Mission Bay here and all this estuary, this is a functioning estuary with water flowing out of Twin Peaks and coming down here and flowing out. There's a lot going on here. And south of Market, most people don't know, there's a great video, Here 5, capital letters, and it discusses south of Market, which used to be undulating dunes. South of Market's like the flattest part of town. When I was in my 20s, I'd skateboard that thing like all day long, right? And down Fulton, back on Folsom. And it was great. It was a phenomenal neighborhood because it's flat as well. It wasn't that way. What it was, if we look at that 1857 again, it was a peat bog. It was a lake from Bluxom and 3rd Street all the way up to like 7th and Market, 9th and Market, that was 40 feet deep, fed by an aquifer that's a creek coming out of Hayes Valley, going underground and surfacing. And on the surface, so all of this landmass is sand dune, and what happens to any plant, there are no trees, so all you have is seagrasses, anything organic is getting caught in this swamp, and it's anaerobic. It gets inundated, and there's no oxygen. So we have a peat bog, and the peat is 8 feet thick, and the water is 40 feet thick underneath it.
Is that
So,
liquefaction?
well, it definitely has that risk, but what they did is they eventually created some seawalls. It took them forever. They would dump stuff in, they'd take in 40 truckloads of stuff, and the next day it would be gone. There would be nothing there, it would be completely gone, because this hydrocurrent was coming out of Hayes Valley, and it was tidally influenced underneath the peat bog. But you could walk across the peat bog. There's a place called Webster's Garden in the Annals of San Francisco. Is a great book, by the way. Marty mentioned it. If you're going to look at one about early San Francisco post-Americanization, so pre-Americanization would be Gertrude Atherton's splendid idle 40s. Post-Americanization would be the Annals of San Francisco, because it's within 5 years of the Americans arriving. And what it's discussing is an in-the-moment perspective of what we're seeing in regards to change already. And that's very, very fun. In that book, they mentioned Russ's Garden. Russ's Garden was at like 4th and, I guess, maybe Folsom or so. And what it was a high point on the peat bog that you could walk across the peat bog and get to. And all this was over here was messy and noisy, and literally there are potholes that horses fall into and disappear on Kearny Street. Those are the stories from the 1850s, right? The American Theater and the Delphi were right here. A great story. The Delphi Theater were coming out after a show and riding the carriage up, and the carriage sinking up to its axles, and that was that. And they just said, cut the wheels, and they just buried the carriage there, because they couldn't get it out, it weighed too much. Right? So this is where we are. And south of Market, this was all peat bog. So then anyway, that's gone. That's all gone.
So to the right of Baker Beach,
So let's see. There's
that body
Lake
of
Merced.
water, what
Yeah.
is, no,
So this one.
that?
So that's Lake Merced.
Okay, but it no longer has an access out to the
That's right.
ocean.
So it was
Okay.
originally an estuary
Okay.
of outflowing water, and we have limited that. We've done so because at a certain point, that rancho was owned by the Spring Valley Water Company. And when the SFPUC was created in 1909, we took all of their land. Well, we couldn't take the rancho because that superseded our right by eminent domain. It was rancho land. That's a different law than any other law. Ranchos had to be acknowledged, et cetera, et cetera. So Spring Valley had that holding. They got pretty well ripped off by the city of San Francisco, so they sold off the land for Ingleside Terrace and built that neighborhood that precipitated enough money for them to file the lawsuit. In 1917, the city of San Francisco paid $85 million for that land and those goods, which we had previously paid $1 for. So this Laguna de los Merced, or the Rancho de Merced, was Spring Valley Company, and since they were in the water business, they shut off the estuarial aspect so they could use it as watershed to store water and without it becoming brackish. And that's also why it has those severe sides. It was always kind of severe, but not quite that severe. Any other questions?
Well, I'm sure
Last
there
one.
are. Okay, last, all
One
right.
question. On some of the earlier maps, just predating your gold rush, it looks like Front Street was actually the ghetto front.
Yeah,
Is that right?
absolutely, absolutely. And, but only for a short period. It was created as Front Street. Front Street is 3 blocks in from, or out into the bay from where the
Did they
waterfront
just
started.
scrape the sand dunes down and push all the sand?
In
dunes
part, yeah.
down?
I mean, we had the ships to bury. Yes, you've got sand to throw in there, it becomes hard pack at the bottom. Any ship that you can scab everything off and scuttle it and fill with dirt, that's a basis and a foundation. But yeah, there's a lot of empty available material. We do have steam shovels by this time as well. So 1 man, 1 shovel is what I always say, but it's actually 1 man, 1 steam shovel. Pretty good job.
All right, well, thank you all for coming, and
Yeah,
thank you.
guys,
to
thank you so
We might be able to keep you around for a couple minutes if you guys want to ask questions.
But I don't want to keep you, you know, I can go on and on. So many maps.
Thank you all for coming.